Inflation is running hot right now all around the world. Here in the United States, consumer prices rose by 6.5% in 2022 alone. Still, this doesn't really paint the full picture as the prices of grocery staples have continued to outpace inflation. The average price of a dozen eggs, for example, increased from $179 to $425 in 2022. That's a whopping 137% increase in prices. But while eggs might be the most egregious, they're certainly not alone. Here's a look at how the prices of common groceries have changed over the last year. Unfortunately, there doesn't appear to be any end in sight just yet. While the Federal Reserve has tried to curb inflation, its efforts seem to have reached their natural limits as rising interest rates have begun to stress the banking sector, resulting in the collapse of Silicon Valley and Signature banks. A number of analysts now believe this may jeopardize further interest rate hikes as the Federal Reserve looks to prioritize preventing a banking crisis. Inflation could very well be here to stay a little longer. So what can we do about it? Well, at the Gold Nugget, we believe in making the most out of the opportunities available. In other words, it's high time we embrace inflation and make it work for us rather than against us. We call that hedging against inflation. Just like with everything else, in investing, there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all. You need to carefully study the environment you're in, perform extensive research and due diligence, make well-informed investment decisions, and then just hope it all works out in the end. Alternatively, you can always watch our videos for the latest inflation news, research, and investment strategies. Subscribe and click the bell icon to never miss a beat. So here's what the evidence tells us. Historically, during periods of inflation where the consumer price index remained above the target 2% for sustained periods of time, there were only two assets that were able to provide a good return for investors. These were 10-year US Treasury inflated protected securities, also known as TIPS, and gold. These assets provide a respective 7% and 5% annualized return on average. All other asset classes, bar real estate, gave zero or negative returns. However, recent developments in 2022 show that US 10-year TIPS, which are a type of US government bond, may have decoupled from the consumer price index and no longer provide the protection against inflation that they once did. While inflation raged in the United States in 2022, the average price of the TIPS index fell by more than 19% due to rising interest rates. Yields have been unable to keep up. We can only really make limited conclusions about the correlation that US TIPS have with inflation, particularly high inflation. That's because US TIPS were only first introduced in January 1997. Since then, the United States hasn't really experienced sustained high inflation. In fact, the highest inflation got between 1997 and 2021 was when it reached 4.1% in 2007, though it did quickly drop down to 0.1%, 2.7%, and 1.5% over the next 3 years. Investors should always remember that US TIPS are not designed to beat inflation, but merely to protect investors against some of the effects of sustained inflation, particularly in an environment where interest rates are low and stable. Needless to say, with rising interest rates, this isn't really the environment that we find ourselves in. This leaves us with gold. Gold not only offers protection against inflation, but can also protect you against the ever-increasing money supply, popularly known as the government's money printing machine. Unlike fiat currencies that can be created by governments out of thin air, there is only so much gold out there, rendering it immune to the manipulation of central banks. Even better, the evidence also supports gold as an excellent hedge against inflation. Here's some data from the United Kingdom for a change. Inflation in the United Kingdom reached dizzying heights in the 1970s, peaking at around 23% in 1975. At the end of the decade, the average annual inflation rate stood at 12.8%. Only two asset classes provided investors with positive real returns in the 1970s. Houses produced a modest 41.5% return over a 10-year period. Gold, however, appreciated by a staggering 382.9%. Bonds and stocks, on the other hand, produce disappointing negative returns of minus 33.8% and minus 16.5% respectively. Transitory or not, inflation is here and it's time you make inflation work for you rather than against you. Gold can help protect your purchasing power against inflation and even grow your portfolio during times of economic and political uncertainty. Purchasing gold, physical gold, carries significant drawbacks. These include the costs of purchase, storage, and insurance. Furthermore, the associated transaction costs are often very high. For this reason, it might be worth considering investing in a gold ETF. GLDB ETF, ticker GLDB, is an ETF that's 100% fully exposed to gold, tracking the Solactive Gold-Backed Index, which consists of a portfolio of investment-grade corporate bonds fully hedged to the price of gold. In addition to protecting your purchasing power against inflation, the GLDB ETF pays out a monthly 3% annual dividend yield.